Sweetheart, this is a corporate office, not Shark Tank. We don't negotiate with junior staff. That single sentence, uttered with a condescending smidgen of amusement, was delivered directly to my face by Clarissa Vane, the Vice President of Human Resources at Apex Solutions. She sat behind a pristine mahogany desk, flanked by inspirational corporate posters that preached teamwork and integrity, while handing back my 14-page compensation review proposal like it was a napkin covered in grease. I did not blink. I did not raise my voice. I did not even flinch when she performed that classic executive head tilt, the patronizing posture designed to make senior technical employees feel small, inadequate, and utterly replaceable. I simply nodded slowly, took a quiet breath, and tucked the disrespect deep into my memory like a live cartridge loaded into a chamber. At 49 years old, with over 24 years of hands-on experience in enterprise systems architecture, database management, and network security, being spoken to like a fresh college graduate who had just wandered into the building was almost surreal. I had joined Apex Solutions 4 years earlier, following a turbulent corporate acquisition. At the time, executive management promised that taking a title slightly below my experience level would be strictly temporary, assuring me that rapid advancement would follow as soon as I demonstrated my technical capability. Instead, I found myself buried in an organization governed by incompetent executives and posturing middle managers who possessed zero understanding of how data moved through their company. My primary responsibility was maintaining the fragile back-end integrations that connected Apex Solutions to its major corporate partners. It was grueling, thankless work that required constant vigilance, yet management treated the technical infrastructure as if it operated on pure luck. 1 week prior to my confrontation with Clarissa, I was sitting alone in the break room at 8 in the evening, eating lukewarm instant soup under the buzz of flickering fluorescent lights. The air smelled of burnt coffee and corporate neglect. I was manually reconciling a massive, corrupted customer data pipeline that should have been fully automated 3 years ago. However, the company's internal software tools were horribly broken. Half of the software integrations looked as though someone had thrown spaghetti code into a blender and allowed Elliot Briggs, our lazy senior IT technician, to patch the mess together with duct tape and wishful thinking. I stayed late every night that week. I worked 75 hours in 7 days, fixing broken database scripts, manually rerouting 3 critical application pathways, and single-handedly uncovering a ghost billing error that had been draining $22,000 every month since March. All of this extra labor was accomplished while my direct supervisor, Gavin Miller, was busy hosting team-building workshops and forwarding me emails that he himself had been copied on. Gavin was a man whose entire career's strategy consisted of taking credit for other people's labor while avoiding any actual technical responsibilities. When I compiled my 14-page proposal and scheduled the formal meeting with Human Resources, I did not approach the desk with arrogance. I brought hard evidence. I included verified performance logs, documented security patches, revenue savings reports, and testimonials from external client leads. I documented how my direct interventions had saved the firm over $300,000 in potential contract penalties over the preceding 12 months. I was not asking for an outrageous executive salary. I was simply asking for a fair, market-rate compensation adjustment that reflected the massive financial value I generated every single day. Instead, Clarissa leaned back in her high-backed leather chair, folded her hands together, and offered a practiced, hollow smile. "Duncan, you have to understand how corporate hierarchy functions," she said, her voice dripping with artificial empathy. "We appreciate that you put in extra hours, but company policy regarding salary bands is non-negotiable. We cannot create exceptions for individual contributors, especially those in junior analyst roles. We must maintain equity across the entire department." The department she spoke of was comprised of 5 people, 4 of whom went into a total state of panic whenever I took a single day of paid time off. When I was out of the office, basic vendor portals locked up, security alerts went unaddressed, and client data flows ground to a complete halt. Yet in Clarissa's mind, my technical labor was identical in value. to someone who spent 6 hours a day organizing electronic files and chatting near the water cooler. I looked at Clarissa for several seconds, observing the calm arrogance in her posture. I realized instantly that explaining technical realities or contractual obligations to someone who viewed employees purely through administrative line items was a complete waste of breath. I gathered my printed documents, placed them neatly inside my leather briefcase, and thanked her politely for her time. I walked out of the Human Resources suite with a smooth, unruffled expression. Clarissa undoubtedly believed she had successfully asserted her authority and closed the book on an annoying employee request. She had no idea that her condescension had just set off a catastrophic chain reaction that would dismantle her comfortable executive lifestyle. To fully comprehend the sheer scale of management incompetence at Apex Solutions, one must understand how corporate acquisitions typically erode technical culture. 4 years earlier, when Apex acquired our previous engineering firm, executive leadership promised a seamless integration of software systems, employee roles, and corporate benefits. We were assured that merit, technical expertise, and operational reliability would determine career progression. In reality, the acquisition served as a gateway for bureaucratic bloat. Competent engineers were gradually replaced by slick project managers who excelled at creating elaborate slide decks while possessing no understanding of system architecture. My own position was reclassified twice under arbitrary HR rubrics, effectively freezing my career trajectory while increasing my operational responsibilities tenfold. Every time a critical database migration failed, or a primary API gateway went offline, it was not the well-compensated project managers who were summoned to rectify the damage. It was always me. I spent countless weekends sitting in dark server rooms and remote diagnostic sessions, fixing fundamental architectural mistakes committed by offshore development teams hired to cut short-term expenses. When I presented my 14-page proposal to Clarissa Vane, I was not merely asking for extra money. I was offering a comprehensive blueprint to modernize Apex's entire software delivery model. I had detailed how automating our vendor reconciliation pipelines would eliminate human error, reduce infrastructure overhead, and permanently resolve our chronic client compliance issues. Clarissa did not read a single page of that technical roadmap. To her, a junior employee presenting solutions was an offense against corporate hierarchy. I returned to my workstation on the 3rd floor, sat down at my desk, and resumed my daily tasks without displaying a single sign of anger or emotional distress. I answered routine support tickets, answered inquiries from junior colleagues, and maintained complete professional composure. But that evening, after returning home to my quiet suburban house, I made a fresh pot of coffee, booted up my personal computer, and began executing a carefully calculated strategic plan. I did not post angry rants on social media, nor did I send emotional emails to executive leadership. Instead, I began conducting a thorough digital reconnaissance operation. I reviewed every corporate partner, enterprise client, and third-party vendor that Apex Solutions had interacted with over the past 4 years. My personal browser history quickly transformed into an extensive hit list of organizations that had suffered from Apex's technical blunders and delayed project deliveries. 3 days into this covert job search, an extraordinary email arrived in my personal inbox. The subject line read, "Confidential inquiry regarding legacy integration frameworks." The message was sent by Preston Holloway, the Senior Director of Global Systems Architecture at Vanguard Logistics. Vanguard was Apex Solutions' absolute largest enterprise client, accounting for nearly 45% of our firm's annual recurring revenue. Vanguard was a logistics giant managing multi-million-dollar supply chain networks across the nation, and their entire tracking system relied heavily on data bridges maintained by Apex. Preston wrote that during an internal systems audit at Vanguard, he had personally inspected historical incident tickets from the preceding 2 years. He noticed that whenever a major data outage or credential failure occurred between our systems, my name was consistently listed as the primary technical lead who diagnosed and resolved the root failure. He pointed out that while Gavin Miller was busy sending polite, useless status updates to Vanguard's executive board, I was the one working until 3 in the morning, restoring their data pipelines. Preston invited me to meet informally for breakfast at a private club near Vanguard's corporate headquarters to discuss enterprise system architecture and prospective opportunities. I immediately requested a single day of paid time off for the following Friday. When I handed the leave request to Gavin Miller, he barely glanced at the paper before signing it. He was busy customizing his avatar on the company communication platform and making jokes with the marketing team. He probably assumed I was taking time off to emotionally process my rejected salary raise. I smiled politely, thanked him, and walked away. On Friday morning, I dressed in a tailored navy suit, polished my shoes, and met Preston Holloway in a quiet, sunlit private dining room. Preston was a sharp, pragmatic executive in his mid-50s who valued technical competence above corporate posturing. He did not waste time with small talk. "Duncan, we are having massive problems with Apex Solutions," Preston said, taking a sip of black coffee. "Their leadership promises enterprise-grade reliability, but their actual code base is a disaster. Billing records arrive encrypted under outdated protocols, data transfers fail 3 times a week, and security access logs are practically non-existent. Every time we demand answers, Gavin Miller sends us useless slides. But every time the system actually gets fixed, your name is on the server log." He reached into his leather briefcase and pulled out a bound document, sliding it across the table toward me. "We don't need another account manager lying to us," Preston continued. "We need a brilliant technical mind to oversee our entire vendor ecosystem. We are establishing an enterprise compliance division at Vanguard. I am offering you the position of lead systems auditor. You will report directly to our Chief Information Officer, with complete authority to inspect, audit, and evaluate every external software vendor doing business with our organization." I opened the document and reviewed the financial terms. The base salary was more than double what Apex Solutions was currently paying me. It included full health coverage, an executive performance bonus, and comprehensive authority over vendor compliance. "There is one critical condition," Preston added, looking me squarely in the eye. "Vanguard is preparing for its mandatory annual enterprise compliance review. Our board of directors wants a complete, uncompromising audit of Apex Solutions' back-end infrastructure before we renew our multi-million-dollar annual service agreement. We need an auditor who knows exactly where their technical vulnerabilities and compliance failures are hidden." I looked at the contract terms, felt a surge of cold, focused clarity, and picked up a pen. I signed the agreement on the spot, confirming my official start date in exactly 3 weeks. The journey from my decision to seek new employment to my first strategic meeting with Vanguard Logistics was driven by meticulous preparation. After years of watching Apex leadership mismanage enterprise contracts, I knew that standard job application portals were a complete waste of time. Executive recruiters rarely understood high-level integration architecture, and generic online listings would only lead to another bureaucratic trap. Instead, I focused exclusively on enterprise organizations that interacted directly with Apex software ecosystem. I compiled a detailed matrix of corporate clients who had submitted emergency incident tickets over the preceding 24 months. Vanguard Logistics immediately stood out as the prime strategic candidate. Their business model depended entirely on real-time data synchronization across 48 regional distribution centers. During my preliminary research, I uncovered public regulatory filings indicating that Vanguard was preparing for an extensive compliance overhaul. Ahead of a public stock offering, they needed ironclad vendor security and seamless data integrity. When Preston Holloway responded to my inquiry, it was not a coincidence. It was the direct result of targeted positioning. Our initial conversation at the private dining club validated every suspicion I harbored regarding Apex's reputation in the enterprise market. Preston disclosed that Vanguard's executive committee had already placed Apex Solutions on a secret performance probation list due to recurring data corruptions and missed SLA commitments. My unexpected arrival with deep insider technical knowledge provided Vanguard with the exact operational intelligence required to enforce accountability. For the next 21 days, I operated a seamless double life with surgical precision. By day, I was the quiet, understated senior analyst sitting in my designated cubicle at Apex Solutions, completing assigned tasks without complaint and enduring Gavin Miller's useless team meetings. By night and on weekends, I was working covertly for Vanguard Logistics under the official designation of Phase Zero Systems Consultant. Utilizing isolated sandbox environments provided by Vanguard's security team, I began conducting a deep forensic analysis of the technical interfaces connecting Apex Solutions to Vanguard's enterprise networks. What I uncovered during those late-night sessions was far worse than simple technical negligence. It was systemic corporate fraud and severe regulatory non-compliance. To cut operational costs and boost short-term profit margins for executive bonuses, Apex leadership had systematically dismantled basic security safeguards. Instead of enforcing mandatory multi-factor authentication and individual encrypted credentials as required by federal law, Apex employees were sharing master administrative passwords stored in plain text across unencrypted shared drives. Furthermore, critical security patches and database compliance protocols had been ignored for nearly 4 years. Under federal law, specifically the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, Section 404, codified under Title 15 of the United States Code, Section 7262, enterprise service providers, managing corporate financial and operational data, are legally required to maintain strict internal controls, audited access logs, and certified security standards. Additionally, the unauthorized storage and sharing of administrative credentials violated statutory provisions under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, codified under Title 18 of the United States Code, Section 10030. Apex Solutions was in direct, willful violation of multiple federal statutory mandates while fraudulently collecting millions of dollars in enterprise service fees from Vanguard Logistics. I documented every single violation with painstaking detail. I archived diagnostic server logs, saved internal email threads where Gavin Miller explicitly instructed technicians to ignore security warnings to meet arbitrary deadlines, and generated high-resolution architectural diagrams illustrating every point of systemic failure. On a Wednesday morning, exactly 10 days prior to my official start date at Vanguard, I logged into Apex's internal employee portal and submitted my formal written resignation. I gave the standard 2 weeks' notice, keeping the statement brief, professional, and entirely devoid of emotion. Clarissa Vane did not even bother to schedule an exit interview or call me into her office. She simply processed the electronic notification and sent an automated computer response containing an unreadable PDF file titled Offboarding Guidelines for Departing Junior Staff. I discovered that the PDF file itself was corrupted and could not be opened, a perfect testament to the utter incompetence of her administrative department. Gavin Miller wandered over to my cubicle later that afternoon, holding a mug of cold coffee and leaning casually against my desk partition. "So you're leaving us, Duncan?" he asked with a condescending grin. "Let me guess, taking a minor technical job at some struggling startup? You know, corporate stability is hard to find these days. Good luck out there. You'll probably realize how good you had it here and ask for your job back in a few months." I looked up at Gavin, maintained a completely serene facial expression, and replied, "Thank you for your guidance, Gavin. I am confident that my next role will be an educational experience for everyone involved in this enterprise." On my final Friday afternoon at Apex Solutions, I cleared out my desk drawers. I packed my personal notebook, my custom mechanical keyboard, and a single coffee mug into a small cardboard box. I handed my physical access card to the front receptionist, walked out through the revolving glass doors, and stepped into the cool evening air. I opened my personal leather planner, flipped forward to the following Monday morning, and drew 2 bold lines beneath a single entry written in capital letters. Audit Day. Clarissa Vane and Gavin Miller believed they had successfully managed out an uncooperative employee. They had no idea that I was about to return as their corporate executioner. Navigating the 21-day transition period required absolute emotional control and relentless focus. Operating as a dual-role professional meant that every action, email, and digital footprint had to be executed without error, At Apex, I continued to arrive precisely at 8 in the morning, attending every meaningless status meeting and nodding politely whenever Gavin Miller pontificated about team synergy. Meanwhile, during my evening diagnostic sessions for Vanguard, the full extent of Apex's regulatory exposure became overwhelmingly clear. The unencrypted credential repository was merely the tip of a massive compliance iceberg. I discovered that customer data backups were being stored in unverified off-site servers without proper encryption protocols, violating explicit non-disclosure agreements and enterprise security standards. Furthermore, internal access logs revealed that several former employees who had left Apex over a year prior still retained active administrative access to Vanguard's primary data pipelines. This unbelievable security oversight created massive vulnerabilities under federal cybersecurity statutes. When I submitted my formal resignation letter, I deliberately kept my departure notice minimal. I did not engage in dramatic arguments or express satisfaction. I watched Gavin Miller patronize me one last time, knowing that every word of condescension he uttered would make his ultimate downfall in front of the executive board even more devastating. On Monday morning, at precisely 8:30, I walked back through the front doors of Apex Solutions. However, I was no longer carrying a cardboard box or wearing faded business attire. I was dressed in a bespoke dark charcoal suit, carrying a high-security encrypted briefcase, and wearing an official Vanguard Executive Auditor credential clipped prominently to my chest pocket. The security guards at the front desk, who had received high-priority authorization directives directly from Vanguard's legal department earlier that morning, immediately stood at attention, printed my executive access pass, and escorted me directly to the glass elevators leading to the executive floor. As I walked down the central corridor of the third floor, the atmosphere transformed instantly. Employees froze in their tracks. Troy Stanford, a data specialist who had ignored my technical warnings for years, stared at me in total disbelief, allowing his pen to drop from his hand onto the floor. Two junior software developers stood frozen near the printer, whispering frantically as I walked past them with absolute authority. Outside Conference Room 3B, Clarissa Vane was standing near the executive refreshment station, holding a glass water bottle. When she looked up and saw me approaching flanked by security, her smug expression instantly collapsed into a look of absolute bewilderment. She scanned my executive credential, recognized the Vanguard corporate crest, and turned visibly pale. "Duncan?" she stammered, her voice high-pitched and lacking any of its former condescension. "What are you doing here? Did you forget to turn in your company equipment?" "I am here to conduct a formal operational review, Clarissa," I replied in a calm, resonant tone that carried down the hallway. "Vanguard Logistics has initiated a comprehensive enterprise compliance audit." She tried to force a defensive smile, though her fingers were shaking against her glass bottle. "You are assisting Vanguard's audit team?" "I am leading the audit team," I corrected her, pushing open the heavy glass door of the main executive boardroom. Inside the room, Harlan Brooks, the vice president of operational strategy, and Gavin Miller were sitting at a long mahogany table, surrounded by printed quarterly financial statements. When Harlan saw me enter and take a seat at the head of the table, he jumped up so abruptly that his chair slammed into the wall behind him, knocking a framed company award to the floor. "What is the meaning of this intrusion?" Harlan yelled, his face turning red with anger. "Why is a former junior employee sitting in an executive client meeting?" I placed my encrypted laptop on the polished wooden table, connected it to the high-definition presentation system, and looked directly at Harlan, Gavin, and Clarissa, who had followed me into the room. "Gentlemen and ladies," I began, my voice steady and commanding, "I am here in my capacity as lead systems auditor for Vanguard Logistics. Under Clause 9.3 of the Master Enterprise Services Agreement between Vanguard and Apex Solutions, Vanguard is exercising its statutory and contractual right to execute an unannounced, retroactive 12-month audit of all operational infrastructure, credential security protocols, and regulatory compliance standards." Gavin looked frantically at Clarissa, his voice cracking with anxiety. "This is absurd. Duncan resigned 10 days ago. He is an angry former employee who was denied a salary raise by HR. This is a complete conflict of interest. Harlan stepped forward, trying to project executive authority. Duncan, whatever personal grievances you have with our human resources department, this is a formal corporate environment. You have no legal standing to make demands here. I pressed a single key on my laptop, projecting a massive spreadsheet onto the wall. The file title was displayed in giant text, Vendor Access Master Credentials version 4 unencrypted. This unencrypted data file was discovered in a public cloud repository accessible to unauthorized neural networks with multifaceted authentication, INL. It contains active master administrative login credentials for Vanguard's primary logistics network. Diagnostic logs prove that this file was modified 3 weeks ago by an uncertified intern, and external access logs confirm 7 distinct unauthorized logins from non-VPN networks. Harlan stared at the screen, the color completely draining from his face. Gavin began stuttering, looking frantically through his papers. Under Sarbanes-Oxley compliance regulations, Section 404.15 U.S.C., Section 7262, this gross breach of internal controls constitutes an immediate material breach of contract, I stated firmly. Furthermore, under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, 18 U.S.C. Section 10030, maintaining unencrypted master credentials exposes both organizations to severe federal criminal and civil liability. Clarissa stepped forward, her voice trembling. That spreadsheet was merely a temporary administrative reference. It was never intended as a permanent record. I turned my head and looked directly into Clarissa's eyes. I submitted 4 separate internal security incident reports regarding this exact spreadsheet over the past 12 months. Every single report was dismissed by your department, with written notes stating that junior staff should not meddle in executive administrative policies. I pulled 3 bound manila folders from my briefcase and slid them across the table toward Harlan, Gavin, and Clarissa. Effective at 9 o'clock this morning, Vanguard Logistics has formally frozen all pending contract payments to Apex Solutions, totaling $1,400,000. Pending the conclusion of this audit, I declared. Furthermore, all active data transfers between our networks have been restricted to read-only status under my personal supervision. A heavy, suffocating silence descended upon the boardroom. Harlan looked at the legal notices, then at Gavin's pale face, and finally at me. He realized with absolute terrifying clarity that his entire company was completely at my mercy. The atmosphere inside the executive boardroom during that initial audit meeting was charged with extreme tension. As the projected spreadsheet displayed the unencrypted administrative credentials on the main screen, the physical demeanor of Apex's leadership completely collapsed. Harlan Brooks, a man accustomed to intimidating junior subordinates through loud vocal assertions, sat frozen in his chair, staring at the legal notices I had placed before him. Gavin Miller tried twice more to interrupt the presentation, asserting that the data logs were out of date or misconstrued. Each time he spoke, I calmly presented verified digital signatures, time-stamped server receipts, and archived email threads showing that he had personally acknowledged the security risks months prior and ordered technicians to ignore them. Clarissa Vane remained standing near the door, her hands clutching her clipboard like a lifeline. She realized that her dismissive comments regarding junior staff were now part of an official enterprise compliance audit report that would be reviewed by Vanguard's board of directors and legal counsel. The authority I exercised in that boardroom was not derived from emotional vengeance. It was grounded in undisputed technical facts and federal legal frameworks. By freezing $1,400,000 in pending contract payments, Vanguard effectively cut off Apex's operational cash flow, forcing their executive committee to confront the reality of their gross mismanagement. Over the course of the next 7 days, the operational structure of Apex Solutions completely unraveled under the weight of the audit findings. My investigative team uncovered 19 major statutory compliance violations, 37 critical security vulnerabilities, and over $200,000 in fraudulent billing entries, resulting from improper data manipulation. Vanguard's senior legal counsel arrived on Wednesday morning to formally serve Apex Solutions with an official notice of contract default. The executive board of Apex immediately launched an emergency internal investigation, desperate to limit their personal legal exposure and avoid catastrophic corporate liability. Gavin Miller was summarily terminated from his managerial position on Thursday morning, after audit logs demonstrated that he had systematically falsified operational status reports to secure quarterly performance bonuses. Clarissa Vane was placed under immediate administrative suspension without pay, pending an investigation into her department's failure to maintain legally mandated compliance documentation and employee records. During this period of corporate chaos, my personal inbox and phone line were bombarded with messages from remaining Apex directors. Men and women who had ignored my presence for years were suddenly sending frantic emails, begging me to accept private consulting engagements at 5 times my previous hourly rate to help them patch their broken infrastructure before federal regulators intervened. I issued a single, automated reply to every request. Vanguard Executive Compliance Division does not engage in private advisory services, with vendor entities currently undergoing default enforcement actions. At the same time, several highly capable technical analysts and junior developers from Apex reached out to me privately, expressing their desire to leave the sinking company. Recognizing their genuine technical skill and their frustration under corrupt management, I conducted formal interviews and hired 4 of them to join my growing compliance team at Vanguard, offering them competitive salaries, full benefits, and real professional respect. On Friday afternoon of the second week, Vanguard Logistics officially executed the final termination clause of the Master Enterprise Services Agreement, permanently cutting all commercial ties with Apex Solutions. The loss of their primary client plunged Apex into immediate insolvency, forcing them to initiate emergency corporate restructuring and lay off over half of their management staff. Before concluding my final on-site duties, I scheduled a final administrative session in Conference Room 3B at Apex headquarters. When I walked into the room, Clarissa Vane was sitting alone at the far end of the table. The sharp executive suits and arrogant posture were gone, replaced by a defeated demeanor. She was clutching a stack of personal offboarding papers, her corporate career effectively destroyed by her own negligence. She looked up at me as I took a seat across from her. "I imagine you feel immensely proud of yourself, Duncan," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "You destroyed our entire operation." I looked at her with calm, unwavering focus. "I did not destroy your operation, Clarissa. Your vanity, incompetence, and utter contempt for the people who actually performed the work destroyed your operation. I simply exposed the truth to the executives paying the bills." She looked down at her papers, tears welling in her eyes, unable to utter a single word of defense. I opened my leather portfolio, pulled out the final compliance audit verification form, signed my name in clear ink, and closed the document folder. "3 weeks ago, you informed me that Human Resources does not negotiate with junior staff," I said evenly. "You were correct about one fundamental principle: corporate standards must be enforced. But your critical mistake was assuming that technical expertise would remain subordinate to bureaucratic arrogance forever." I stood up, adjusted my suit jacket, and looked down at her with complete composure. "We do negotiate now, Clarissa, but only with individuals who demonstrate true professional integrity and competence." I picked up my briefcase, walked out of Conference Room 3B, and navigated through the silent hallways of Apex Solutions. I stepped out through the front lobby into the warm afternoon sunshine, knowing that justice had been fully served, my career was elevated, and the truth had prevailed. The final collapse of Apex Solutions served as a monumental case study in corporate accountability and technical justice. Within 2 weeks of Vanguard executing the contract termination, 3 other enterprise clients initiated independent compliance reviews of Apex's software infrastructure. Referencing the audit findings documented by my team, the board of directors at Apex launched a sweeping overhaul of executive leadership. Harlan Brooks was forced into early retirement, Gavin Miller was blacklisted from executive technical management, and Clarissa Vane's HR department was dismantled and replaced by an external compliance advisory firm. At Vanguard Logistics, my newly established enterprise compliance division flourished. The 4 former Apex technicians I hired proved to be exceptional assets, rapidly modernizing Vanguard's vendor oversight protocols and building an automated data validation system that eliminated vendor errors across all 48 distribution hubs. Looking back at the entire experience, the transformation was profound. What began as a condescending dismissal by an arrogant HR manager ended in the complete restructuring of 2 major corporate entities. Corporate hierarchy may grant temporary authority, but ultimate power always resides with those who possess the knowledge, integrity, and courage to enforce the truth.